back to Not For Everyone, episode 3 here, and certainly appreciate everybody who's been listening in along the way, and certainly appreciate the feedback, the questions, the conversations that have been sparked, because that's what this whole thing was about in the first place. So to those of you that have been listening in and engaging with, I guess, the content we're putting out here, certainly appreciate that, and look forward to your continued support. Today, I want to talk about emotions, and I think this is something that's a bit taboo, and I think it's also something that we don't have robust enough conversations, honest enough conversations. I think at the end of the day, we certainly we know the basics, but we don't know how deep our emotions go or what they're really there for, and anything like that. So before we kind of dive into that, and I talk about any of that in depth, I want you to just take a moment to have an openness to what I'm going to say, and I, as I always say, I hope that you question it. I hope that you if you can't implement it into your own life, you can at least come forth with an understanding of why. So I think the first thing we need to understand is that how we perceive life completely dictates the outcome of our lives. One of the foundations of the foundational study probably of sports psychology, they were able to determine that the way we perceived adversity was actually a good predictor of how we're going to perform under stress and under pressure. And what they found was, if you perceived adversity as a negative, you had the thoughts of, I'm not good enough, or I can't do this, the I can't crowd. What they found was there was a physiological response that really hindered performance. So, your heartbeat, your rhythm changed. There were cardiac responses. There was, your blood vessels actually tightened. So the ability for blood to flow was much more difficult, making your heart work harder, and not feeding muscles as well. Your body stopped producing the fatty acids that allow our mind and our muscles to connect so well. So messages were taking longer, so response time was a little bit slower. Certainly physical output wasn't as strong. So what they then found was those that saw adversity as an opportunity to either to win the game, to learn and grow, whatever the case may be, their physical output was actually much greater because the blood vessels were wider, the fatty acids were present, your neurological responses as a result were much, much greater. So certainly something to keep in mind, that how we perceive anything it dictates our physiological response. So I think people also fail to realize that that's where our mental clarity comes, is our emotional regulation. If you are overwhelmed and you're stressed and there are a million things on your desk and you can't get through it, at no point does anybody work best that way. You may have a million things on, but if you can compartmentalize and clearly and concisely answer each one, you're always going to be in a better position. And I think that we overlook the connection of emotional regulation with our psychological clarity. So certainly something also to value when it comes to perception. And the third thing when it comes to just perception is our ability to respond rather than react. My second season in Australia, we got off to a really good start. We lost the first game, and then we won 10 straight. And we were playing a team that was towards the bottom of the standings, and they had younger guys. They had some talent, there's no doubt about it, but I think they were in last place. They only had like one win at the time, and um, we ended up losing the game, and it was it was frustrating because it was a game that we didn't need to lose. There's no doubt about it, and um, yeah, there's a couple blow ups in the middle of the game, and I was certainly one of them. And coach comes into the game, to be fair, he's probably my best friend to this day, but he comes in and he unloads on us, and rightfully so. But I remember he called me an emotional dickhead, and I remember it pissed me off, and like I was ready to like stand up and have a go at him. But um, it's funny because the truth can project that out of you if you're not handling yourself correctly. And the play that he was referring to, our screen coverage, not to get too technical here, but we were doing something on the defensive end that um, the first part of it was executed well. The second part of it was very poor. And so it was 3 straight easy baskets right at the rim. There was a layup and 2 dunks. And I turned to the bench after the third one. You need to fucking change it, like, how it is, and the heat of the moment. And I certainly went off about it. And he was right to call me that. I remember on the ride home, I was driving home. The game was about an hour away, and I was saying to Carly in the car, and just like going off about it because I was an emotional dickhead, and that was something that I needed to hear. I wasn't happy to hear it, but long term down the track, when you can look back at it, absolutely was. And I was very reactive in that time, where as I got older and I understood how to respond with my emotions, I became much more even. I was able to actually use my emotions in a healthy way to either pick people up or keep people calm, or light a fire if I had to, whatever the case may be. So responding with your emotions as opposed to reacting with your emotions is always going to be an absolute game changer for you. Now, when it comes to emotions, when you're reading people and having traveled the world and understanding different cultures and the differences, it can be a bit eye-opening. And what they've proven is that emotions are a human construct. It has nothing to do with societal upbringing. And I come from the tri-state area back home, and that's New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. It's very fast-paced. It's very high tempo. The rest of the world sees this as really rude. I remember when I first came out here, Carly thought I was so rude because of how I would answer and end phone calls. And everything can be in a bit of adjustment. But you go to Finland as an example, and I use Finland because of where the study I'm leading into was done. But they call it the Finnish smile, where nobody smiles. But it doesn't mean that they're not quote unquote happy. It's just how they express their happiness is different to, say, here in Australia, where everybody's smiling all the time, and the sun shines where I live 300 days a year, and things of that nature. So in Finland, they did this study, and they took people from 3 regions of the world. It was roughly 1,000 people in the study, and they would emotionally manipulate you, and they would get you to feel, I believe it was about a dozen, it was 8 to 12 emotions. And what they found was, to a very high degree, they had people feel the emotion and then color in on a chart where they felt it, what they felt. And it ranges from heat to cold and neutral and all those kinds of things. And what they found was, it doesn't matter where you're from or how you were raised, you feel things the same way. So again, it's a human construct. It has nothing to do with how you're taught to feel, or how you're taught to express your feelings. And so if our emotions lie in the same areas, then that has to mean that those are messages that our brain is trying to get, regardless of the language you speak, anything like that. So um, it's a really interesting study. I'll certainly link that into the comments because I think it could be quite useful for a lot of people. And that leads me to the next point, that our emotional state can tend to, or I shouldn't say our emotional state, our ability to regulate our emotions is highly determining of how we attach ourselves to things. So I'll use myself as the example here. When I was a professional athlete, it gave me a sense of pride. It gave me a sense of, you know, security within myself. It's a very unsecure career, but the security within myself, it gave me a sense of motivation. It gave me a false sense of happiness, but happiness nonetheless. So my point being is that I attached myself to my career, right? I attached to what I do rather than to who I am. I wasn't proud of, you know, my resilience or my capabilities or how hard I was working, my discipline. I was just simply proud, and I was attached to the profession that I was in. So for me, I think when we attach ourselves to something, it shows that we're severely lacking in some area. So I love the Japanese culture. I think they do a lot of things really well, and they see the world in a really great way. But they have a philosophy that we all wear 3 masks, and in those 3 masks, that first mask is who we show to the world. It's when you step out your front door and you go to work and you ride the bus or whatever the case may be. That's who you are, and that's what the world is going to see. Now, that second mask, it's a little bit more vulnerable. The second mask is the one that you show your close friends, your family members, your loved ones, your innermost circle. And then the third mask is the one that you only wear when you're by yourself, and that is the most authentic version of you. And I think when it comes to anything in life, we need to get more comfortable wearing that authentic version with other people around, because if you can't honestly be who you are, you're always going to be chasing your tail, right? You're always going to be chasing. You're going to constantly be engaging with others under false pretenses, and if you can't be yourself, you're always going to be limited into what you can achieve. If you're driven by the fear of judgment, if you're driven by the anxiety of, social engagement, if you are driven by the things that you feel you don't handle well, there will always be a limit to what you can do and what you can achieve. And the more you shed and the more that you allow yourself open to the world, the greater that things are going to become. And I think for me, both in my own experiences, from seeing other people's, from working with people, authenticity, and I said this in episode 1, authenticity absolutely reigns as the most important thing that you can live your life with, because authenticity allows for you to just be yourself, to put yourself in the world. You're not chasing after a version of you that maybe isn't meant for you to be. It's where integrity lies. It's where honesty lies. It's where all the good lies. But you just have to be willing to work against somebody else's projection to be the best version of you. And it is that simple. Authenticity will emotionally regulate you because you're going to allow yourself to feel what you feel. You're going to understand what you're feeling, and you're going to go from there. And I just think the world is losing that authenticity, and I've said it before, and I'll certainly say it again. There's no doubt about it. Now, there are 5 emotions that I think we misjudge, and I want to talk about, because I want to give an alternate perspective on those things, because I think throughout what we do with society is we have positive and we have negative emotions, and I think it's the worst thing that we can kind of do, is label things. And again, that's a human construct. That is a human desire to explain what we think, what we feel, what's around us. It's a safety mechanism. It's a million things, but it's not right. And I think the best one to start with is anxiety. And I think anxiety is so overblown as a negative thing. Like, oh, I'm feeling anxious. No, you're not in control of that anxiety. Like, think about when you feel anxious, right? For those of you that suffer from social anxiety, then you don't want to go out because, oh, what are people going to be doing? What are they going to think of me? What is their judgment of me? What is their perception of me? We talk about it all the time in sociology. I am who I think you think I am. So I'm too worried about my perception through your lens rather than authentically being myself. And we start to create this overwhelm. So it's not so much the anxiety that we're dealing with, it's the overwhelm from all of the questions our anxiety is asking us. And when it comes to anxiety is our problem solver, point blank, period. And we're going to speak about depression in a moment, but depression and anxiety are almost always linked, almost always. And it's because we'll get to why that is in a moment, but you're constantly asking yourself questions. What do they think of me? Why am I going to this? Will it be safe? What is the desired outcome? How do I achieve this? It's just constant questioning. So anxiety is not the issue. It's the overwhelm from not having the answers to those questions that creates the mental disparity and the emotional disparity into what we want. So certainly we need to make sure that we are doing a better job of sifting through that anxiety and learning to control it. And that's all it is. It is 1000% all it is understanding that it's our responsibility to control our emotions. And I think the biggest thing that gets blown out when it comes to anxiety, and it goes back to attachment. We feel the need to attach to a specific outcome. Will they like me? I want them to like me, right? So if we start with the attached outcome, I want to win. I need to win. Why? What will they think of me if I lose? And then all of a sudden you go down the track of, now I'm losing. Control what you can control. It was eye-opening for me when it comes to attachment and anxiety, working with some of the golfers that I have. And these guys are incredible. I've walked it with them. I've practiced rounds. I've seen them play live. Their ability to hit the ball, like I've played one round of golf in my entire life, and their ability to hit the ball and with such accuracy and distance and precision over and over again, it is so incredible. And I remember the very first time I was walking with one of my guys, and we're walking down the street or down the fairway, and he hits the ball, and okay, we're walking, hits the ball, walking, hits the ball, stands around a bit, go to the next hole. And after like the third or fourth hole, I remember thinking to myself, like, holy shit, these guys spend a lot of time by themselves in their own head. And it was so eye-opening to me, the mental control that they needed, because like as a basketball player, you're dealing with players, you're dealing with teammates. A possession's 24 seconds long. Yes, there's mental control there, but you have to control your anxiety. Now, one of my guys, he really struggles with his anxiety, especially in performance, and he'll probably hate me telling this story, but he was leading through a major tournament a couple years back, leading through 3 days, and that anxiety just took the best of him, and I think he was 18 under, so he was averaging 6 under for for each day, and the last day I think he shot seven over. And the coolest thing about that though was how he perceived it, because his worst nightmare came, and he finished 15th or something like that. And um, the first thing he said to me after the message, I didn't know, I wasn't sure what route he was going to take there, and said to me, so yeah, but now I know what it's like to lead, and I'm going to be better for it. And he is, like, he absolutely learned from it. And it's not the end all be all, and he's been phenomenal since. So just remember that anxiety is your problem solver. It is not meant to be overwhelming. It is not meant to concern you with failure. It is there to solve your problems. And if you can allow yourself to just remain calm in the anxiety, and just one question at a time, one focus at a time, one point at a time, that overwhelm will never come through. So it is, again, your responsibility to control it. And it's so simple. Just continue to focus on one question at a time. It has nothing to do with the outcomes, and don't attach to outcomes. Don't attach to desires. It's, what is the question? What is the answer? I'm on this question until I figure out that answer. Everything else is secondary. So, I certainly hope that opens up a conversation around anxiety, and internal dialogue around anxiety that may be beneficial. Now, the second emotion, as I kind of touched on a bit, was around depression. And I think depression is the big bad dark cloud that we fear follows us around, and we're constantly feeling as if we should be running from it. And I think it's because, sadness isn't a clinical diagnosis, but depression is, and there's such a stigma around that depression. And it is what it is. It is how we view it, and it is our responsibility to continue to move that space forward, so we don't have to see it that way anymore. So, I think when it comes to depression, it's our responsibility to really understand why we're depressed. And depression is there's something within us that isn't being fixed. It isn't being answered. It isn't being addressed. And if we want to ever fix that depression, there's only one thing we can use, and that's our anxiety. And anxiety will ask the right questions all the time. You have to listen to it. I'm a big believer that whatever we create, we can fix. And if we fall into a bout of depression, if we feel a bit off, it's our responsibility to fix it. We don't need to go down these pharmaceutical pathways. We don't need to go down all these extravagant roads just to figure out what's going on with us. You need to listen to the inner dialogue. You need to have that inner dialogue, because without it, certainly not going to ever make the advancements that we need. And I think we're as a society, we're too quick to look for somebody else to save us. And I think as a society, we are too quick to look outward rather than look inward. And the moment that we can make that shift as a society, and culturally, and get that message around the world that the answers always lie within you, that is going to be the moment that we can shift the mental health space, to be completely honest with you. And I think when I look back at it, like when I went through my depressive state, and I struggled with suicide, and I struggled severely with various components of my mental health, it was simply because I was too busy looking at everything that didn't actually matter to me. And I talked about the importance that it was to me to be a professional athlete and how proud I was. But I was proud because I was able to tell others that. It wasn't because I achieved what I wanted to achieve. Because to be completely honest, I wanted to achieve more than I already had, and it had nothing to do with what others thought. But I was too consumed in what others thought to actually achieve the things that I really had set out to do. So, um, I think that was part of it. I think not paying attention to my own personal journey. Like I was not developing as a human being. I was allowing basketball. I was not allowing, I was forcing basketball to develop me. It was, I needed the injuries and the setbacks. I needed the good games and the bad games. I needed to travel the world to experience people outside of my little bubble that were going to push me. And I think when you rely so heavily on one thing unconsciously, it just creates a million problems in everything else. Like I was losing sight of my moral compass. When my mother got sick, it was, the end of the world. And again, I could have handled all those things better. I don't think you can ever lose a parent and say, like, and feel happy. I don't care what your relationship with your parents are, but I think it didn't have to be as difficult as it was had I been better equipped, because I had developed more as a human being. And one of the big things that I do when I work with athletes, I'm more conscious on developing them as a person, as to say, all right, let's make you a better mental athlete. Because to be honest with you, not to get too far off track here, but to be honest with you, every athlete has every single tool ever given, ever invented, ever made, to be successful. There's plenty of literature, there's plenty of podcasts, videos, there's resources, team psychs, there are coaches, there are mentors. There are a million things. But the problem is their performance is suffering because they're not developing as a human being. And I will die on that hill. I absolutely will. And as much as I want to see people really excel in sports, I want to see people excel when they're done playing. Because I retired at 33 years old, and it's like you have your whole life ahead of you. And I think it's getting better. People are more aware of it. But what happens when you leave that sport and you haven't worked on yourself? And I was speaking to somebody over the weekend who's playing at a really high level, and they've done so for many years. And he said that he's thinking about retiring after the season, and simply because he's got other things that interest him now. And it when I hear those kinds of things, it really does something for me. One of my clients, he's only 25, 26 years old, and he has built an incredible business outside of his sport, with his sponsors, with getting into companies and doing various things. And when we speak, it is, I would say, in the hour sessions that we have, maybe 10 minutes is about his actual sport and how he's performing, and the rest of it is about his life, his relationships, how he's growing as a person. And the results always come that way. And it's because we keep him out of a depressive state. Like, he'll hit me up when he's feeling, hey, look, I'm struggling a bit. All right, cool. Like, let's sit down, let's have this conversation. And the first thing I do, all right, what's the question that's most pressing to you? And he always has an answer right away. Okay, cool. Like, this is what we need to do to fix it then. And I think whenever you're trying to achieve something, whenever you want to obtain something, whenever you want to level up, it is your responsibility to ask the right questions and to grow in every area outside of that one area. Like, you can't become a world-class athlete if you're a mess off the court. You can't. And even if you do reach levels of an elite level with the talent that you've been blessed with, at the end of the day, it is going to come crashing down. And you've seen it. You've seen the NBA players talking about their mental health. You've seen the guys that have fallen out of the NBA. You've seen, the soccer players, the coaches. You've seen it all. And we continue to ignore that this isn't a sustainable thing. And yes, as an athlete, you only have a finite period. You can't do this for your whole life. But we need to make sure that we are keeping people in a strong mental state, because it is just, it is an absolute disaster across many sports. And there are plenty of people working hard to improve that space. But now that we've gotten completely off topic of depression, obviously something I'm very very passionate about. But again, those depressive states, those are just alarm bells. It's nothing to panic about. It's the alarm bell that I need to fix something. I need to address something. And you know it because it's sitting at the top of you. It's not some mystery. The question is, are you going to be willing to sit there and say, you know what, I got to go through some hard shit and I need to have some real honest conversations with myself right now, and I need to make some changes. And it could be the people in your life. It could be the habits that you're undertaking. It could be your health habits. If you're consuming alcohol every night, you're going to have bad mental health. It's going to eat away at you. And, we all think we're invincible until we're not. And that's something that I do hope to see change. And, again, when I was going back to my own story, when I was depressed, it was my responsibility to say, hey, look, I'm in a bad way, and it's because of the people I'm associating with. It's because of the environment that I'm in. It's because I haven't worked on myself in 10 years' time, and now I'm just a disaster of an adult. And I have no problem admitting those things, because admitting those things, it's what's changed my trajectory in life. And admitting and correcting those things is what has led me to this business and to speaking and to all the things that I'm doing today. So you can't be attached to the shame. You can't be attached to who people knew you as. We're all growing, we're all evolving. It's your responsibility to continue that path. And the second you stop, it is my belief that those depressive states start to creep in. Like, if you want to do the same thing over and over every day for the next 40 years, I don't care how you think, what your circumstances, your personality types, any of that kind of stuff, you are going to hit a wall at some point. And for some, it may be quicker, and others it may take longer. But your responsibility to your mental health will continue from the day you're born to the day you die. And running from that depressive state isn't going to get you there. And the third emotion I want to talk about is generally connected to depression. And it's, speaking about grief here. And I think grief is something that we can't understand until we've experienced it. And it's very unique in what it does and when it comes up and these kinds of things. And, we generally associate that with the people that, like when we lose a loved one, we have to grieve over their loss and things. And there's no doubt that's the case. And from my own experience, we all grieve differently. We all process thoughts differently. We do a lot of things differently, and that's perfectly fine. But grief is more unique than the loss of loved ones. It would be easy for me to sit here and talk, and those are stories that we've heard before. But grief, the functionality of grief is to let go of something, right? And grief kind of fills the void when we have to let go of something. It fills the void in us. And so if we, I'll use my mother as an example. It was, I was grieving my mother because she was obviously an enormous part of my life, and there was an enormous hole, and the bigger the hole, then the heavier the grief. And I had to fill that void with grief until I could slowly close the ring, by understanding, through empathy, through, filling it with other things. Like, it's never that I've let go of my mom or I've forgotten about her or anything like that. Obviously, it's just in the present moment, other things have to fill those holes. And um, I think what I see people really struggle with, and again, I use the athlete as the example, but what I really see an athlete struggle with is grieving over their career. And I actually went through this a few months ago. I was very content with my decision to retire. It's what I had wanted. I had been contemplating it for a couple seasons, and um, some things happen, and the way things shake out, it just, I was very comfortable with my decision. And it was about 6 weeks or so before the season started, this current season, and I was just flat. I was off. I couldn't explain it. I knew it. I understood it. But the question as to why was eluding me. And I sat and I talked to Carly about it, and I raised it. I said, I know but I've been feeling a bit flat, and so on and so forth. And she helped me realize that I was grieving the loss of who I used to be, because for so long I was attached to being an athlete. I was attached to having a purpose. I was attached to all these things that made up this perception of who Eric was. And as time went on, it became more and more clear. And as soon as I came to that, you know what? It's absolutely right. I am grieving the loss of this version of who I concocted for 17 years, we'll call it. And so to get through that, we actually went out to dinner to celebrate my career. We talked about it in a very positive light, not the injuries, the failures, the everything that you don't want to remember. But we talked about, I was a skinny little 17-year-old kid from Hightstown, New Jersey, and I had a dream, and I said, I'm gonna do something with my life, something that I can be proud of. And I look back on it, and I visited dozens and dozens of countries. I played games there. I've traveled across Europe. I've traveled to Australia. I live in Australia. If at 17 you would have said, you're going to see the world, and it's because of this ball that you're bouncing in the driveway, I never would have believed it. But here we are, and I'm absolutely proud of that. But I have to let that version of me go, because its growth is capped out. Like, I can't grow in that space anymore. And I'm running my own business. Like I said, I'm speaking. You get brought into people's companies, to teams, to workshops, to community services, and it's tell about your story and deliver what you understand, and all those kinds of things. And like I said, like, none of that can happen if I don't have the gall to let go. And that grief was filling that, albeit relatively small, void of letting go of my career, because I hadn't fully embraced what I'm doing now, like the podcast, unfortunately getting on social media, all those kinds of things were the things that I hid from. Like, I hid from them for so long. And I've justified my reasoning to say, look, I have a message, and I feel like I can help people, and whether it does or it doesn't, it'll be up to the path that's ahead for me. But my job is to fill that void, to fill that grief with a purposeful existence, and doing something meaningful with my life. And while it was important to me to be a professional athlete, and while it was important to me to achieve what I wanted to achieve, yes, you can impact people by how you play the game and how you carry yourself, but that pales in comparison to doing something more meaningful. And I genuinely believe that's what I'm doing now. So, um, certainly something that I'm grateful for, but that grief has allowed me to let go. And without it, I couldn't be doing what I'm doing today. And the fourth emotion that I want to talk about would start with fear, right? And I think fear is a big thing that kind of stops a lot of people, and you certainly have to have the courage, and the courage is just the control of your anxiety and the control of what you choose to respond to. So, um, I think fear is the most misunderstood emotion, and it's simply because it has the exact same physiological response as excitement. So when you feel fear and when you feel excitement, your body does the exact same thing. And this is what I talk about, the importance of perception, because you're perceiving by judging fear. And it's so you sit there and you say, well, I'm fearful of this, but aren't you excited for the opportunity of what could be on the other side? You may fear failure, but you're excited when you win. You may fear public speaking, but you're excited about the validation and standing up for yourself and putting yourself out into the world. And I just think if we just started with that, when we taught everybody about fear, and fear is nothing more than an excitement, and you're just choosing to judge it in a negative manner. So whatever you're fearful of, you have to run towards, because really good things are on the other side of that. Like, you may be fearful to take the last shot in the game, but you'll be excited when you make it. You may be fearful of putting yourself out into the world, but you'll be excited when you realize how many people you can impact. Everything has cause and effect in life, and life is about ones and zeros, as I call it. It's yeses and nos. It's for everything you say yes to, you're saying no to something else. And if you're choosing to allow your fear to run you away from um, all the things that are meant for you, the greater good. Like, people fear change, but change, if you want, let's say you want to make $1,000,000 a year. If you fear change, you're never going to get there, because right now you don't make $1,000,000 a year. And so you can never get to $1,000,000 a year, but you have to create change. And that fear is the internal compass that points us in the direction that we need to go to achieve and to attain the things that we want. Um, I remember every year in college, the athletic director always started the year with a theme. And one year he was talking about the roar of a lion, and he said that you know when a lion roars, all the other animals run, but the other lions run towards the roar because it signifies a kill. It signifies something that's going to benefit them. So if you can take the fear out of the roar, so to speak, the adversity, the things that frighten you, then you can realize that that's where all the good things lie for you. So just continue to um, redefine how you see fear and perceive fear, because deep down you're really just excited about what's to come. And the um, fifth emotion I want to speak about, it's anger. And like I said, my coach has called me an emotional dickhead, and I've certainly struggled with my anger at times. And for a long, long time in my life, I suppressed it. I was always, I'd say, I have a lot of anger inside of me, and I always suppressed it because to be fair, I was out of fear of not being able to control it. I remember in college, my coaches always wanted to see more of it, but I was always cautious, I suppose, simply because of what could happen. And I learned over time the importance of anger. It is incredibly important. Like, when you think of anger, you think of it in the head, you think of it in the chest, maybe some of you in the pit of your stomach. But that anger is what creates in our life. Like if you think about any artistic person who has achieved great things, the composers, the painters, um, musicians, whoever it may be, that art was created out of anger and emotion. And like think of a time maybe you've been bullied in your life, or somebody's giving you a hard time at work, or you're struggling with a relationship, whatever the case may be, and that anger is just deep seated, and it builds into frustration, and then eventually that anger comes out of you. Somebody says something over the line, somebody does something, whatever the case may be, but that anger all of a sudden comes out of you, and what happens is you create a boundary. It's you're defining the line in the sand that you're no longer willing to accept as the standard. And if you're telling people, if you're going to cross that line, this is the side of me that you're going to receive. And I think so few people, especially if we're speaking culturally, in Australia especially, hate showing that side of them, that anger, and everybody wants to get along. Back home, especially where I grew up, anger was much more widely accepted, we'll say. But you need to use that anger. Otherwise, it just manifests into frustration, into resentment, into judgment, and all the things that don't serve us. And I think if you can allow yourself to express that anger, it's what can absolutely change and create, like, we all want to live by a standard, but nobody wants to do what it takes to get to that standard. So anger is the number one driver of change. Like if you're angry at the results you're getting, if you're angry that you were passed up for a promotion, if you're angry that your significant other is not listening to you, whatever the case may be, that anger, when projected in a controlled way, is actually incredibly healthy, and it's the driving force, it's the fuel to change. And so many people suppress their anger, and then they can't figure out why they don't create change in their own life. So I would certainly say that anger has to be one of the things that we have to get more comfortable with. We get more comfortable using. We have to have more respect for others that project their anger. And while I'm not saying that it's healthy to run around and just lash out at people, it's certainly, when used correctly, something that can absolutely change the trajectory of your own life. So those are the five emotions that I think we misunderstand most, and I think those are five that truly dictate a lot of growth and the pathways that we're willing to take. So I think as a whole, if we can continue to just understand our emotions, continue to listen to our intuitive beliefs, why is that emotion there? You don't feel anything for no reason. So make sure that you are paying attention to those things. And certainly, over time, I'll certainly spend more time on specific emotions and how it can benefit you, and how to, in a healthy way, implement it into your own life. But that's certainly it's certainly something that I do hope we progress in as a society, and normalizing our emotions, however, normalizing and making it more abundantly clear to people how to use them in a healthy manner that keeps their mental health stable, that allows them to achieve the things they want to achieve, that doesn't impact others in a negative manner. So certainly something that I have a passion about, as you can tell, and certainly something that I hope to see continue moving forward. So that's going to wrap it up for episode 3. I really appreciate everybody who's been following and listening, and the feedback. I can't emphasize that enough. The feedback is immensely important to me. I want to make sure that I'm hitting on topics that people feel are valuable. I certainly want to hit on topics that people may feel they could be struggling with. So um, continue moving forward, continue being better than yesterday. Progress is small, but steady progress is better than no progress. And I just can't emphasize the importance of looking after yourself, chasing the things that you want, and leaving this world a better place than you found it.